Loss coach, a guy who 1000% cares, and that's why we share. And today I am going to share with you information about insulin response, and it all pertains to fat loss basics. Now, I have sat down with doctors, I have sat down with nurses, personal trainers, nutritionists. I have sat down with quite a few people that you would assume knows what insulin is and what it does and what the role is between losing weight and insulin either helping or hindering. So I decided today we would take a big step backward so we can take some leaps and bounds forwards. Okay. Now, if you're new here or you catch me on YouTube, do me a favor and share. Make sure that you like, subscribe so that whenever we upload information, you get a notification. You're notified because we want you to get this information because I truly believe in what my favorite book says, and that is, my people perish for the lack of knowledge. So if you are uninformed and you're going to someone who is misinformed or don't know or they're uninformed, then what the hell? That's not doing anybody any good. So instead of just taking someone's word for it, which I always encourage, and oftentimes we make available all of the citations that support everything that I share and have shared since 1995. Now, I wasn't sharing citations in 95, but that's when the journey began. And I have seen a lot since that time, and I've grown a lot. And the diet-free life methodology has continued to improve because even though it's based on science, it's not settled science, meaning it's not like Newton's law, right? It's not gravity. You grab a penny, you let it go, it's going to fall. And it's going to happen each and every time while we live on Earth, unless something crazy happens. Well, the diet-free life methodology has had to adapt. But the good news is that the primary principles that make it so cool and so unique and so helpful have remained the same. How to make a fat-burning meal is the same. What a fat-burning snack looks like is the same. The only difference is that we've progressed quite a bit in being able to meet people right where they are. And I'm not just talking about lifestyle. I'm not talking solely about where it's cash convenient. We're not talking, just about finances. We're talking about where is your body from a biometric, from a biology point of view, because everyone is unique. And I've talked about this for years. We all have a unique metabolism. We know that some people are fat burners, other people are carb burners. We know that everyone burns calories at a different rate throughout the day. Gender plays a role. Your height plays a role. How wide you are plays a role. There's many things that play a role. However, certain things are science, and the evidence is in when it comes to insulin. Now, the reason why you want to understand insulin can be summarized just by looking at their meanings, right? Their definitions. So what I did is I put together some basic descriptions of what they are. We'll talk about it for a second, but if you can get it in your mind and own it, when I talk about insulin in different aspects, it's going to make it so much easier for you to follow along, right? Especially if it is your goal to maximize not just losing weight, but overall health. Because as you will learn more and more and more, insulin, like no other hormone, every cell in your body has a receptor for insulin. Insulin is involved in so many activities in our bodies, and there's a direct causation and correlation between insulin and everything from PCOS, low testosterone, low testosterone, geez, migraines, high blood pressure, arthritis, various cancers. And you would assume that even though this information may be somewhat new to you, that every physician and all the other wellness experts would know about it. Well, I didn't know about it the way I understand it today. If you went back just 2010, that's when I jumped in and made it a goal to see how I could upgrade the Diet Free Life methodology so they can meet people where they are with an understanding of two things: the role of the gut microbiome and the role of insulin. And so during that time, I came across 3 studies that looked at weight loss as it pertained to people who were insulin resistant and people who were insulin sensitive. And the way they lost weight was totally different. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, okay, he said insulin resistant, he said insulin sensitive. Okay, I don't understand what is insulin. Like what is it really? Okay, and that's why we go back to these 3 descriptions or definitions of that I believe will put you in a position where you will better understand everything that has to do with insulin as we continue to talk. And even when you go back and look at some of the other recordings that I've done where we talk about insulin resistance or insulin sensitivity, we talk about glucose and fasting glucose and all those things. When you thoroughly understand what the word means, and you can then relate, it makes everything that we're talking about so much easier. Okay, so stay with me on this, and I want you to get it. Okay, so when someone asks you what is insulin, what comes to mind at this moment in time? Seriously, if you're catching me live or even a replay, before we get to me sharing exactly what it is, like, what is insulin to you, right? Because almost everybody I sit down and talk to, and I've worked with a lot of people over the last year, and I asked them about insulin. I'm telling you, and I'm not saying that everybody's dumb. I'm just saying that the large majority of people do not know what insulin is. And when they start talking about it, they talk about it in a way where they think they know, but they are so far off. Okay. Even people who've been in the medical field forever, it's just not talked about. And even glucose. I asked a nurse the other day, hey, what is glucose? And they started talking about a whole bunch of stuff that was not glucose. Right. So, oh man. So I was just going, okay, let's go back to the basics, because with the basics, even as a martial artist, when you have the basics and you're really good with the basics, you can get as fancy as you want to get. Okay, so what is insulin? Well, insulin is a hormone. Okay, and I want you to think of, we have millions of hormones, but a hormone is a messenger. It's, when we're looking at cells, there's something that communicates, sends signals. They're very important, right, to our overall health and how our body communicates from within. So insulin is that. It is that. It's a hormone, and it's largely responsible for regulating. That means it's in charge of the metabolism. Okay, the metabolism meaning, and I'm referring to when you eat something, for instance, your body breaks it down. It eventually gets into your small intestine, gets absorbed into your circulatory system, right, your bloodstream, and then it makes its way to cells, and there's interaction there, and then whatever's not used, eventually can be eliminated. But there's a whole bunch of interactions taking place as it pertains to metabolism. So insulin is a hormone that regulates the metabolism of carbohydrates, carbs, fats, and protein. And one of its main things is to promote the absorption of glucose, which was a carb, whether it was broccoli, whether it was a potato, okay, whatever the carb is, rice, tomatoes, those are all carbs, okay? It promotes the absorption of glucose that comes from those carbs from the blood, and it places that glucose into the muscles, into the liver, into your fat cells. That's how it gets in. So insulin is anabolic, meaning it's there to help with growth. And its job is to get glucose out of the blood, because if it stays in the blood, it can create a lot of problems. And our bodies are beautiful. They're designed amazing. So the glucose leaves the blood and goes into the liver, muscle cells, fat cells. As I mentioned, it's the main anabolic hormone of our body. Now, glucose serves as energy for our cells, right? So when you eat carbs, that's energy for our cells, or it can be converted into fat when necessary, when needed. Insulin also affects other metabolic processes, such as the breakdown of fat or protein. Okay, you with me? So insulin is not a negative thing, it's a positive thing. It is an anabolic, um, positive, uh, contributing hormone that helps regulate macronutrients. And all that means is we have carbs, fats, and protein. So that's what insulin does. It is not sugar, it is a hormone. So if I asked you on the phone, or if I was coaching you and I say, what is insulin? You say it's a hormone. That's all you got to remember. And if you wanted to go into any kind of detail, you would say, well, it helps get glucose, one of its main jobs, because it does a lot of things, out of our blood and into our cells. That's it. You stop there. You got it. That's the basics of insulin. Now, the second thing that you want to know, and there's three when it comes to insulin. So the second and third, the second is what is insulin sensitivity, because you rarely hear about that. And what is insulin resistance? Okay, you have insulin sensitivity, and then we have insulin resistance. Okay, so let's do insulin sensitivity first. And it's important. Let me preface by saying that 12%, and this is what the studies have demonstrated, 12% of adults in North America are metabolically fit, meaning that they have clear insulin sensitivity. So insulin sensitivity is a positive thing. When I was a kid, I didn't think sensitivity was a positive thing, right? Because I thought sensitive, you're sensitive, right? But insulin sensitivity just means, or it refers to how sensitive the body cells are, which is a good thing, in response to insulin. Simply put, when you're insulin sensitive, the glucose is floating around in your blood, it easily enters the cells of your body. Remember, we talked about insulin, what its main job is. When you're sensitive, everything is working great. Everything is working great. Okay, and that's a good thing. And let's say that you're insulin resistant, which I'm going to explain in a second. You can become insulin sensitive. In the last year, just last week, I have a lady who is down about 40 pounds. She's 74 years of age. She was stuck around 200 pounds. And I started working with her in our coaching program. And today, less than a year, she is like right there. She went from extremely high insulin resistance down to low, right? We have extremely low, and she's right there. Like she's, I think next week she'll be extremely low. And then with some consistency, within the next 30 days, she'll be sensitive. She will not have any insulin resistance. And she did it at 73 years of age. Now I'm turning 74. Think about that. I have two other clients who are in their 70s that were insulin resistant. And today, they're insulin sensitive. That's amazing. Now, when you're insulin sensitive, you can eat a lot of foods that many people don't eat because they think it's going to cause them to gain weight. These clients who are insulin sensitive, if they want to eat cereal, they want to have English muffin, bagel, they want to have rice at lunch, they want to have a potato for dinner, they know how to make a fat-burning meal based on the diet-free life methodology. And because they're insulin sensitive, they're good. They're not going to gain weight. They may continue to lose weight. So insulin sensitive is where we want to be. Now, the third thing that I want you to know as it pertains to insulin is, what does insulin resistance mean? In short, it refers to when the body cells don't respond normally to insulin. So when you're insulin sensitive, that's normal. When you're insulin resistant, that means it's not working. This is not as smooth. So when you're insulin resistant, glucose that's in the blood can't enter the cells as easily. So it builds up in the blood, and that can lead to a lot of problems like neuropathy, and the list goes on and on. Insulin resistance is also a driver that can cause or exacerbate such conditions as heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, migraines, as I mentioned earlier, low testosterone, I mentioned earlier, PCOS, and if you don't know what that means, that's polycystic ovary syndrome, and fatty liver, just to name a few. So insulin resistance, and it starts with so many cells, and you can argue which cells the resistance begin with, but let's say it's the fat cells. If the fat cells aren't working as well, that can create other problems. Next thing you know, the muscle cells or skeletal muscle, which normally is responsible for about 80% of the uptake of glucose that gets in your blood. So if the muscle cells have been hindered, that really messes up how well your body works with insulin, right? And then it finds its way to your liver and even your pancreas, where insulin comes from. You can build up some resistance there. So insulin resistance is not what we want. The good news is that we can 100% reverse it. Okay, so we now know what insulin is. We understand that there's a thing called insulin sensitivity, and we know that there is insulin resistance. Now, along with insulin resistance, we have created a report. We refer to this report as the TriBio Fix because it has 3 significant focuses and what it provides you like right now. And for instance, the lady that I mentioned who was 94, who is right there to become insulin sensitive, she's down 40 pounds. She dropped 10% body fat. She's dropped, shed 10 inches off her waist. Her score, her carb threshold score, which is part of this report that we provide for clients, her carb threshold score was 1.3 in the beginning, and the score range goes from 0 to 100. She was 1.3. And what that told us is that she is a carb burner. Now, if you're not a carb burner, you're a fat burner. So if you're insulin sensitive, then you're 100% a fat burner. The good news is that when you're a carb burner, we show you how to eat in a way that makes you a fat burner. So you don't have to wait until you lose all the weight to be a fat burner. The way you eat puts you in a position where you're a fat burner. Then that helps you expedite your ability to drop and release the body fat. And next thing you know, you really are insulin sensitive and you have become a fat burner. And when that's the case, what a relief that is. And so many things improve. I've watched people get off depression medication. I've watched people get off all types of medications, from metformin, high blood pressure medication. I mean, you name it. It's just a matter of doing the work. And what we do is make it pretty easy for you to do the work. Okay, so we know what insulin is, we know what insulin sensitivity is, and we know what insulin resistance is. And I'm going to share one last thing with you before I jump out of here. What we've discovered is that there's 7 levels of insulin resistance. So when we work with the client, as soon as we find out what their carb threshold score is, like with the lady I mentioned, we knew she was insulin resistant, and she was extremely high insulin resistance, extremely high. And now she's almost insulin sensitive. She went down. There's 7 levels of insulin resistance. And what's cool about this is that you can see yourself going from extremely high to medium high. Next, you know, you're medium to medium low to like low insulin resistance, then extremely low insulin resistance, and then boom, insulin sensitive. So we're not just looking at the weight. We're not just looking at the body fat percentage. We're not just looking at some of the common things, right? The biometrics. We're looking at where are you on the scale of insulin resistance, and are we making progress to move you from insulin resistant? And there's a lot of people who don't even realize it, but they're getting worse because they may look at their glucose and assume that if that's going well, then I'm pretty good. But they're actually getting worse, because I have coached people and did their carb threshold score, then work with them 3 years later, and it's worse. I mean, really kind of sad, because we were making progress, and then they just, I don't know, they just disappeared. They got off, and I don't know what they were thinking. And this has happened even with people who have, kind of kept their weight off. We've noticed that their carb threshold score got worse. So again, there's a lot of things that you want to look at to make sure that you're moving in the right direction. And from a intellectual property point of view, we have something that is just not everywhere, and it works. So we've been working on this and been doing this since 2011. And now here we are, 2022, as I record this, and we've gotten it down to where within 5 minutes, I can tell you what your carb threshold score is, and then we can customize a plan specific to you to improve on your carb threshold score. And that, my friends, is gold. So the take home for our time together is that you are a little bit more familiar with insulin. You know that insulin is a hormone. You know that a person could have insulin resistance. And the good news is that you know that we can improve it and they can become insulin sensitive. And there you go. So if you understand that, then and the last thing would be, everyone wants to get to a place where you can lower the insulin response. Now, when you're insulin sensitive, and you made like a basic fat burning meal, you're good. You don't have any problems. You're good. But if you're insulin resistant, then yes, the response is very important. The sad part about all of this, as I record this, because there's things happening that's going to change all this, there's no way to monitor or measure your insulin response at this moment in time. We can measure your glucose response, right? Because people go buy diabetic glucose monitors. You can eat, wait 2 hours, prick your finger, and we can see what the impact or the response is on your glucose, right? Sugar in the blood, as it pertains to what you ate or the activities that you participated in. At this very moment, we don't have that with insulin. Now, we have, again, the things that we have, and we're still able to make progress, but the day will come where it'll become much easier for people to see what's really going on with their insulin throughout the day. And once they fix that, that's going to the cause, right? Because when you look at the glucose, that's really the effect, right? That's more of the symptom and not the root. The root is going to be the insulin response to the foods you eat, the activities that you participate in. Okay, so I hope that helped. If you have questions, if you catch the replay, just post them in the comments. I usually go through and look, see if there's any questions that I can answer to make it that much easier for you to have clarity on what the goal is or was when we did this share. So I'm Robert Ferguson, America's Fat Loss Coach. Thank you for being here.